It all started with an email that seemed too strange to ignore. I wasn't sure if I should laugh it off or take it seriously. You know the type. Those unsolicited messages that look like a scam. But something about this one stuck with me. The subject line alone sent a shiver down my spine. St. Marguerite's Memorial Hospital, the untold story. I had heard of St. Marguerite's, everyone in town had. It was one of those places that existed only in hushed conversations, a name wrapped in mystery and a sense of dread. The abandoned hospital that no one dared to talk about for too long. I'd driven past it a few times, never lingering. Who would? It was eerie, a hulking, decrepit building that had been shut down years ago, rumored to be the site of everything from medical malpractice to ghost stories. But I didn't believe in ghosts. Or at least I didn't want to. But that email, that single line? If you're brave enough, come and see for yourself. I wasn't sure why, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to go. That it was something I had to do, as ridiculous as that sounded. Maybe I was just looking for a thrill, something to break the monotony of my life. But a part of me thought it might be more than that. A part of me felt like the answers were locked inside that hospital, hidden beneath its crumbling walls, waiting to be found. The drive there felt longer than it should have. The sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow across the sky as I navigated the winding roads that led to the hospital. The town was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're the only person alive. And then, just as I reached the outskirts of town, I saw it. St. Marguerite's Memorial Hospital. It didn't look any less imposing in the light of day, but now that I was here, I felt something else stir inside me. The rumors were true. It looked abandoned, but not forgotten. As I pulled up to the entrance, I could see the broken windows, the overgrown vines crawling up the sides of the building like a disease. The hospital stood there like a monument to something long dead, its once pristine exterior now crumbling and rotting. I took a deep breath as I parked my car, the engine's hum slowly dying away, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. The place was eerily quiet, like it was waiting for something. Or someone. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the hospital. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my mind. Should I turn around? Should I leave? I could easily pretend I hadn't received the email, pretend I never came here and drive away. But the door was already open. I could see the faintest outline of a hallway through the cracked, foggy glass. The invitation was there, clear as day. I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. A gust of wind whipped through the air, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay. It was the kind of smell that got under your skin, made you feel like something was wrong before you even knew what it was. The kind of smell you only get in places left to rot, forgotten by time. And this place had been forgotten for a long time. The front gate had long since fallen into disrepair, the rusted metal bent and twisted, barely hanging onto its hinges. The hospital was now completely exposed, standing in isolation. The faded sign above the entrance read, St. Marguerite's Memorial Hospital, the words almost too faint to read, as if even the hospital was ashamed of its name. I took a few steps forward, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. The air felt thicker as I approached the door. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The silence seemed to press in on me, each step I took feeling heavier than the last. The shadows of the hospital grew longer as the sun dipped lower behind the trees. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling slightly. The metal was cold to the touch, the rust making it feel almost alive, as though it had a story to tell. I hesitated, looking back toward my car. The road was empty, and the air had a strange stillness to it. No one would come looking for me. No one would even know I was here. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door. It creaked loudly, breaking the silence in a way that felt almost unnatural. The hospital stood there, its dark interior just beyond the threshold. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the weight of the place hit me all at once. It was cold. so much colder than I had expected. I glanced around, taking in the lobby. Dust settled thickly on everything, the chairs, the old reception desk, the faded artwork on the walls. It was as if time had stopped here, frozen in place. I could almost hear the whispers of the past echoing through the empty halls. But there was no one here, no staff, no patients, only the remnants of a place that had once been full of life. And then it hit me, the feeling, the unmistakable sensation that I wasn't alone. I wasn't sure how to explain it, but the air had shifted. The silence had turned from peaceful to something else, something heavier. I stood frozen in place for a moment, listening. The building seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for me to make the next move. My fingers tingled where they had touched the door handle, like I had crossed an invisible line. This was it. I had made it inside. But the question lingered in the back of my mind, louder now than ever. What had I come here to find? The door closed behind me with a soft but deliberate thud, and suddenly I was alone in the hospital's dark interior. My breath echoed unnaturally loud in the stillness, and I froze, feeling the weight of the silence press in around me. The air was colder now, heavier, like the place itself was absorbing every sound, every movement. I hesitated for a moment, standing just inside the lobby, trying to get my bearings. The light from the dying sun barely made it through the boarded-up windows, casting everything in a dull, grayish hue. Shadows stretched across the floor like long fingers, reaching out from every corner of the room. I took a cautious step forward, my footfall muffled by the thick carpet of dust that covered the floor. I could feel the floorboards creak beneath my weight, as if the building was groaning, protesting my intrusion. The room felt larger than it had from the outside, stretching out in all directions, filled with remnants of a bygone era. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling and curling at the edges, revealing patches of yellowed plaster beneath. Some of the paintings hanging crookedly on the walls had long since lost their color, their subjects barely distinguishable from the decay around them. The hospital had been abandoned for years, but the signs of life once lived here. The nurses, the patients, lingered in the air as if their memories had seeped into the very fabric of the place. I glanced to my right. A reception desk sat against the far wall, covered in a thick layer of dust, its once polished surface now dull and chipped. Old filing cabinets stood open, papers spilling out in disorganized piles. It was hard to believe this had been a place of care, a place where people had come for help. Now it looked like nothing more than a tomb for forgotten things. I walked past the desk, moving deeper into the lobby, my footsteps slow, deliberate. It felt like I was being drawn into the building's heart, as if the walls themselves were urging me forward. The silence was suffocating. Even the wind outside had died down. It was as if the world had come to a standstill, leaving me alone in this decaying husk of a hospital. I tried to push the sense of unease away. I had come here to uncover the truth, hadn't I? To explore the mysteries that had been buried along with this place. I had been curious, but now that I was here, a part of me wanted to turn back. To forget about the email, the stories, everything. But I couldn't. Something had brought me here, and something was waiting for me. I moved forward again, instinctively reaching for the flashlight I had tucked into my bag. The beam of light flickered to life, casting a weak glow over the dark hallway ahead. The walls seemed to close in around me as I walked, the beam of light barely cutting through the shadows. To my left, I saw the remnants of what used to be a waiting area. Broken chairs sat in odd positions, their upholstery shredded and torn. A few magazines lay discarded on the floor, their pages yellowed with age. An old water cooler sat in the corner, the plastic bottles long since emptied and discarded. Everything in here seemed to have been abandoned in place, left to rot and decay. But it wasn't the abandoned furniture that caught my attention. It was the sound. A faint, almost imperceptible noise coming from somewhere deeper inside the building. A soft, repetitive scraping sound. I couldn't place it, but it seemed to be coming from the direction of the hallway that stretched out before me. I froze. My pulse quickened, and my hand instinctively tightened around the flashlight. I waited, holding my breath, hoping for a moment that it was just the wind. Maybe a loose window or a piece of metal bending in the breeze. But there was no breeze. The scraping continued. I glanced down the hallway, the beam of light catching only the edges of the walls, the darkness thick beyond. The hallway stretched on, disappearing into shadows, the light at the far end barely visible through the grime on the windows. I took a deep breath. I could feel my chest tighten, the unease in my stomach swirling into something darker, something more primal. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, to leave, to get back into the car and drive away. But I couldn't. I had come this far, and I couldn't turn back now. With a shaking hand, I stepped forward into the hallway, the beam of light cutting through the darkness ahead. The scraping sound continued, its rhythm oddly deliberate. As I moved closer, I saw the source. It was a door, a wooden door slightly ajar. The scraping sound was coming from it, but there was no one around to explain it. The door seemed to move on its own, the edge rubbing against the floor with each scrape. I stopped in front of it, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. The door wasn't locked. I could push it open. But did I want to? Did I really want to know what was on the other side? Something urged me forward, as if the hospital itself was calling to me, pulling me into its depths. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking loudly in the otherwise silent hallway. The room beyond was dark, but there was something in the air. A strange heaviness. A feeling of presence. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath me. As my flashlight swept across the room, it landed on something. An old, dusty bed, the frame rusted and bent. Sheets that looked as if they hadn't been touched in years were tangled around it. The walls were lined with empty shelves, and a single window let in just a sliver of light, casting an eerie glow across the room. And that's when I saw it. The chair. It was sitting by the bed, facing the wall. But the strange thing was, it was facing the wrong way. The seat was empty, and I swear I felt something move behind me. I stood in the dimly lit room, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of decay. The flashlight in my hand trembled slightly as I swept it across the room, my mind racing. The bed, the strange chair, the empty shelves, they were all as they should be. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing that could explain the odd feeling of being watched. But I couldn't shake the sensation that something was wrong. The oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional drip of water somewhere in the distance. I turned, scanning the rest of the room, feeling the weight of the shadows pressing in on me from all sides. The walls were bare, save for some faded, peeling wallpaper. A few of the lights had long since been shattered, leaving the room shrouded in near total darkness. The silence felt suffocating, as if the hospital itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then, as I stood there, something shifted. It was subtle at first, just a flicker at the edge of my vision, like the briefest movement. I froze, heart hammering in my chest, staring at the spot where I thought I had seen it. But there was nothing. The room was empty. Still. Silent. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my breathing. My mind played tricks on me. The place was so unnervingly quiet that I must have imagined it. But then the scraping noise started again. It wasn't the soft, dull scrape from earlier. No, this was sharper, more deliberate, more urgent. I snapped my head toward the source of the noise, the chair, the one facing the wall in the corner of the room. It moved. I saw it then, unmistakably. The chair, as if caught in some unseen breeze, shifted ever so slightly, its legs scraping across the floor. But there was no breeze. The air was still. The walls were too thick, too soundproof for anything to move the chair. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. Was I imagining things again? No, I couldn't deny it now. The chair had moved. The scraping continued, dragging across the floor. Something inside me screamed to run, to leave, to get the hell out of this godforsaken place, but my legs felt frozen. couldn't tear my eyes away from the chair. Slowly, hesitantly, I took a step closer, my flashlight trained on it. The beam of light flickered, casting strange shadows that danced and twitched along the walls. As I stepped closer, the chair began to turn. Very slowly, as though it were a person, it began to pivot on its legs, just enough that I could see the back of it. A heavy silence filled the room again. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but I couldn't look away. The chair stopped facing me now, empty. For a moment, there was nothing but the eerie stillness of the room. The chair didn't move. The air felt thick, the temperature dropping even further. I held my breath, the tension unbearable, and then I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a whisper, coming from behind the chair. It was faint, barely audible, but it felt as though it was directly in my ear. My spine stiffened, and I took a cautious step back, nearly tripping over my own feet. The words weren't clear, but the tone was unmistakable. A voice, soft and sickly sweet, almost like a lullaby. But it wasn't comforting. It was a command. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but the feeling it evoked was enough to paralyze me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if something was holding me here, keeping me in place, forcing me to listen. The temperature dropped even more, and I could see my breath mist in front of me, the air thick and frigid. I reached for my phone again, but once more it was dead. The screen flickered for a moment, only to die completely. I couldn't help but think, what the hell is happening here? Then I felt it. A cold hand, light like a feather, brushed against my cheek. I whipped my head around, the flashlight catching nothing but shadows. Nothing. I glanced around the room again. The chair had stopped moving. The whispers had stopped. But the air was still suffocating, the oppressive weight of the silence pressing in harder than ever before. I could feel it now. Whatever was in this place, it was here. With me. I stepped back, shaking my head, trying to make sense of it all. Get a grip, I muttered to myself. This is nothing, it's just an old building. But even as I said the words, I knew they were hollow. This wasn't just an old building. The things I had read, the rumors about the hospital, the stories that seemed too wild to be true, they were here. They were real. And I was only just beginning to understand how far they went. I forced myself to turn away from the chair, from the shadows that seemed to reach for me from the corners of the room. I had to keep moving. I couldn't let fear control me. But as I started to leave, my flashlight flickered once more, and for a split second, I saw it. A figure so fleeting I almost thought it was my imagination. A person standing by the door at the end of the hallway, just out of reach. I froze. The figure was gone by the time I blinked, but I could feel my pulse in my throat. I wasn't alone. The hallway ahead seemed to stretch on forever. A low hum, almost like a whisper, began again, this time more insistent, more urgent. "Leave now," the voice seemed to say. And I knew it wasn't just a voice in my head. It was real. I had to get out. But the hospital had other plans. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, still reeling from the figure I thought I saw at the far end, my breath ragged. Every instinct told me to turn around and run, to escape the hospital before it was too late. But something held me in place. I couldn't leave yet, not without understanding what was happening here. The feeling of being watched, the cold hand on my cheek, it was all too real. The air was thick with dread, but now, a new wave of curiosity washed over me. There was something in this place, something I was meant to uncover. The stories, the whispers. None of it made sense, but somehow I was tied to this hospital now, whether I wanted to be or not. I forced my legs to move, each step slow, hesitant, as though the hospital itself were resisting my presence. The hallway stretched on, the darkness ahead swallowing the feeble light of my flashlight. I could feel the weight of the building closing in around me like it was alive, breathing, watching. The hospital had once been a place of healing, a place where people came for help. But it didn't feel like that anymore. It felt like a place where something dark had been born and left to fester. And it was that darkness that I was beginning to sense, seeping from the very walls, whispering from the rooms I had yet to explore. I moved past a row of rooms, each one looking like it had been untouched for years. The doors were all slightly ajar, but I didn't dare enter them. Not yet. My flashlight's beam flickered as I passed, casting brief glimmers of light on the faded numbers etched into each door. Room 211, Room 213, Room 215. Each room seemed to have its own energy, its own feeling. Some felt empty, hollow, like forgotten memories lingering in the air. But others felt alive, as if they still held something inside them. The energy in those rooms was thick, oppressive. I stopped in front of one door, Room 217. The number was scrawled in fading black paint, chipped and peeling but still legible. The door creaked as I pushed it open, a sound that seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet hospital. Inside, the room was bathed in shadow, the edges of the furniture barely visible. The air was heavier here, thick with the staleness of time. A single window on the far side of the room was cracked open, letting in a thin stream of moonlight. The room looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But it wasn't the dust or the old furniture that caught my attention. It was the smell. It wasn't the typical musty scent of decay, the smell I'd been breathing in since I'd entered the building. No, this was something different, something foul. I took a cautious step inside. The air was thick with it, as though something had been left to rot in here long ago. I couldn't place it. Sickly sweet, almost metallic. The smell made my stomach churn, but I couldn't pull myself away. I had to know what was in this room, what it was hiding. As my flashlight's beam moved across the room, I noticed something on the far wall, strange markings etched deeply into the paint. Symbols. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light to get a better look. The markings were crude, scratched into the wall with something sharp. There were circles, spirals, overlapping, all connected by jagged lines. There was something terrifying about them, something that made my skin crawl. They looked like they had been carved hastily, as if someone had been desperate to leave them behind. I reached out instinctively, my fingers brushing against the wall, where the markings began. The surface felt rough and cold, and I pulled my hand back quickly as though something had zapped the warmth out of it. But as I stepped back, I felt it again. The chill, the growing sense that I wasn't alone. The room seemed to grow darker, the shadows stretching further than they should have been. My breath hitched, and I could swear I heard something, just out of reach. A whisper. It was too faint to make out, but I heard it again. This time, it wasn't from behind me. It was coming from the corner of the room, near the bed. I turned quickly, my heart hammering in my chest. There was a figure in the corner. I couldn't see it clearly, just a vague shape, blurred and indistinct, but it was there. The air grew cold around me, the temperature dropping drastically as the shape moved. It wasn't a person, not in the way I understood. It wasn't solid. It was something else. Something that hovered at the edge of my vision, elusive and haunting. The shape seemed to lean forward, as if trying to look at me, its presence overwhelming. And then, without warning, it whispered again, but this time the words were clear. "Get out!" The voice was hoarse, strained, as though it came from someone who had been trapped here for far too long. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. I stumbled backward, my heart racing, my legs shaking as though the floor itself was going to swallow me whole. I didn't know what to make of it. Was I hallucinating? Had the isolation gotten to me? But no. The room felt real. The figure, whatever it was, felt real. And the markings on the wall, they were too deliberate, too disturbing to ignore. I spun around, ready to leave, but as I reached the door, the whispering returned. It was all around me now, swirling in my ears like 1,000 voices, overlapping and blending together. Get out! The door slammed shut behind me. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I ran down the hallway, my breath ragged, my chest tight with panic, but the whispers followed. They grew louder with each step until I felt like I was drowning in them. I had to get out of here. I had to leave. But no matter how fast I ran, I felt the weight of the hospital's dark history bearing down on me, pulling me back towards something inescapable. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. I had left the room behind, the room with the strange symbols on the wall, the cold whispers, the ghostly figure in the corner. But it was as though the place itself was alive, its dark presence lingering in my bones. I stumbled down the hallway, every step heavier than the last. The air was thicker now, pressing in on me. The cold had seeped into my skin, into my thoughts. I felt disoriented, like I was being pulled in every direction. I needed to get out. But my feet didn't stop. They carried me, seemingly of their own accord, deeper into the hospital toward the basement. There was a door at the far end of the hallway, an old rusted door that had been half hidden by the dust and cobwebs. I couldn't explain why I was drawn to it. Maybe it was the idea of finding answers, of understanding what had happened here. Maybe it was just the terror, the adrenaline pushing me forward. But I walked toward it anyway. The stairs leading down were narrow, steep, and worn, like they hadn't been touched in years. I could feel the weight of time pressing down on me as I descended, each creak of the old wood echoing in the silence. By the time I reached the bottom, my flashlight was barely cutting through the darkness. The air here was heavy with mold, damp and thick, almost suffocating. I could smell the rot, the stagnant water. Something about it felt wrong. The walls were slick with moisture, and the floor was uneven beneath my feet. I reached for the wall to steady myself, but my hand pulled away with a sickening squelch. I looked down. There was something sticky on the walls. Dark, old stains that seemed to seep into the floor. I stepped back, the feeling of unease growing stronger. I had to get out, but there was no turning back now. The room in front of me was a morgue, I realized as I walked further into the basement. The unmistakable cold metal of old hospital equipment lined the walls. Shelves filled with rusting tools, forgotten surgical trays. Everything was coated in a layer of grime, as though the years had simply stopped here. But it wasn't the equipment that caught my attention. It was what lay in the corner. A single bed, the kind that a patient would have laid in. Old, faded sheets that had long since lost their color. But it was the figure on the bed that made my heart stop. At first I thought it was another mannequin, a prop. Maybe left behind by some misguided souls who had used the hospital for their own twisted purposes. But then I saw the way it shifted. The figure on the bed. It was too real. It wasn't still. It moved. The form was partially obscured, but there was a flash of something. A hand, a pale arm reaching out from beneath the sheets. I froze, my breath hitching in my chest. The thing, whatever it was, let out a soft, gurgling sound. It was almost like a whisper, but a horrible, wet kind of whisper. I took a step back, but the sound of my foot hitting the floor was too loud, too intrusive. The figure turned toward me. Its eyes. Those hollow, empty eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. There was nothing behind them, nothing human. Just emptiness, darkness, an endless void. And then it whispered, "Help me." The words weren't clear, but the voice, oh God, the voice, it was like it had come from the deepest part of the earth. Wet, strained, tortured. The very air in the basement seemed to tremble with the sound. My mind screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't tear my gaze away from that bed, from the figure that somehow knew I was here, knew I had seen it. And then, as if the very building had exhaled, the air shifted. The walls groaned, a low, unsettling sound that seemed to come from everywhere. The floor beneath me shook just slightly, but enough to make me feel like I was losing my balance. I backed away slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of here before... The figure sat up. It wasn't a slow movement. It wasn't a gradual rise. It was fast. Too fast. One moment, it was lying there, still. The next, it was upright. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its body jerking into an impossible position. I stumbled backward, the flashlight falling from my hand, clattering to the ground. The beam of light hit the ceiling, casting long, harsh shadows across the room, but I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I was too focused on the thing in front of me, the thing that was moving now, its body writhing like it didn't belong to a human at all. The figure let out a shrill scream, the sound of it scraping across my bones, cutting through the silence like a knife. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were frozen in place, trapped by whatever curse this place held. "Help me! Help me!" The voice repeated, growing louder, more frantic, its voice breaking with something desperate. I could feel its presence growing, moving toward me, pulling the shadows closer, drowning the light. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the figure stopped. Its head snapped back to the wall, its body going limp once more. The silence came crashing back down, so heavy I thought it might suffocate me. I could barely hear myself breathe. But I knew I wasn't alone. Whatever was here, whatever had happened to the people in this hospital, it hadn't gone away. It was still here, still waiting. I turned and bolted from the room, my heart racing, my body moving on pure instinct. The basement was no longer just a place of decay. It was alive. Alive with something that wanted me to stay. I could hear it, echoing behind me as I ran. The whisper. The air in the basement was thick with something cold, something heavy. I could feel it pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe, as if the very walls of the hospital were closing in around me. My feet carried me down the hallway, away from the basement, but I didn't feel any safer. The shadows stretched longer, the darkness deeper, as if the building itself was watching me, waiting for me to understand the truth. I wasn't sure how long I'd been walking, but when I looked around, I realized I'd wandered far from where I started. The halls were all the same now, narrow, dimly lit by the weak light from my flashlight, with door after door leading to empty rooms. Some of them were locked, some slightly ajar, but all felt wrong. Each door seemed to hold a secret, a truth I wasn't ready to hear. But something pulled me forward. It was an instinct, a feeling that I had to keep going, as if something inside the hospital was trying to tell me its story. I rounded a corner and the temperature seemed to drop even further, like I was walking into a freezer. The cold was unbearable. It felt like the very air was filled with regret and despair. I stopped in front of another door, room 306. The number was smeared with grime, barely legible, but it was enough to make me pause. Something about it felt different. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling. I hesitated for a moment, but then I turned it, the door creaking open in a way that sounded too loud for the stillness of the hallway. The room was small, cramped. It looked like it used to be an office, but now it was just another forgotten space. Old papers scattered across the floor, broken filing cabinets, and the remnants of what used to be a chair now toppled onto the ground. But it wasn't the room that drew my attention. It was the air inside. It was thick with something I couldn't name. Faint whispers, like 1,000 voices speaking just below the threshold of hearing. I stepped in cautiously, the light from my flashlight flickering as I moved deeper into the room. And then I saw it. A figure stood in the corner, facing the wall. At first I thought it was just another trick of the light, just a shadow cast by some forgotten piece of furniture. But no, it was too real, too tangible. The figure was shrouded in shadows, its features impossible to make out. It was just a silhouette, tall and hunched, its head bowed as if it were listening to something that wasn't there. A deep sense of dread settled in my stomach, twisting like a knot. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I stood frozen in place. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to breathe. I wasn't sure if I was looking at a person or something else entirely. The air grew colder, the temperature plummeting as if the figure was draining all the warmth from the room. And then it turned. Slowly. Carefully. Its face still shrouded in darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me. It wasn't the gaze of a human. It was empty, hollow, like it had never been human at all. Its mouth moved, forming words that I couldn't hear, but I felt them in my chest, a heavy pressure that squeezed my lungs as if the very words were being forced into me. You should never have come. The voice was faint, a rasping whisper that scraped at my bones. It wasn't the voice of a person. It wasn't even a voice at all. It was a presence, something ancient and bitter, its voice seeping into my mind, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Leave, now. The figure stepped toward me. I could feel its movement before I saw it. Slow, deliberate, like it was dragging its limbs through water. It didn't move like a person. It moved like something else. My heart was in my throat now, pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The figure came closer, and with each step, I could feel the air growing heavier, colder, like the room was closing in on me. The shadows seemed to reach for me, pulling me in, suffocating me with their weight. I tried to take a step back, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot. The figure's face was still hidden in darkness, but I could feel its eyes burning into mine, its presence suffocating, relentless. And then, the most horrifying thing happened. It spoke again, but this time, its voice wasn't a whisper. It was clear. You're not supposed to be here. The words rang out, loud, powerful, as though the hospital itself was speaking through it. The force of the voice slammed into me, knocking the breath out of my lungs. I stumbled back, my legs giving way, but before I could hit the floor, I felt something cold wrap around my arm. It wasn't a hand, it wasn't human. I gasped, struggling against the icy grip, but it wouldn't let go. The cold seeped deeper into my skin, numbing my very bones. I couldn't escape. My flashlight fell from my hand, spinning across the floor and casting its fading beam against the wall. I could see the shape of the figure now, clearer than ever. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. It was a collection of shadows, of remnants of something lost, something broken. And then, with a final bone-chilling whisper, the figure released me. Leave! Before it's too late! I didn't wait for it to say anything else. I bolted. I ran down the hallway, my heart racing in my chest, my breath coming in sharp, desperate gasps. The whispers followed me. The cold followed me. The figure, it followed me. I didn't stop running until I reached the exit. But even then, as I stepped out into the night, I could feel it. The weight of the hospital, the weight of whatever was still trapped inside. I wasn't alone. My heart was still pounding in my chest when I stumbled out of room 306. The whispers had faded, but the cold remained, gnawing at my skin, creeping into my thoughts. I could feel the weight of the building pressing down on me, every inch of it alive with malevolent energy. It wasn't just the hospital's history that haunted this place, it was something that lived here. Something that didn't want to let go. I had to get out. I had to leave before it consumed me the way it had consumed all the others. My legs shook, my mind a blur of terror and confusion. I needed to find the exit. I needed to leave this nightmare behind. But as I turned down another hallway, the walls seemed to close in around me. The once familiar path was now foreign, twisted, like the building was shifting, reshaping itself with every step I took. The halls seemed longer now, the shadows deeper. Every door I passed was either locked or led me into another darkened room that only added to the oppressive silence. I tried to focus, tried to remember where the exit was, but it felt like I was moving in circles. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I had to stop to steady myself against the wall. I tried to keep it together, to think rationally. This is just an old building. You can do this. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. This wasn't just an old building. The floor beneath me creaked loudly, as if the hospital were groaning under its own weight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, that it was watching me, making sure I stayed exactly where it wanted me to. I continued forward, my feet heavy, dragging me deeper into the heart of the hospital. The hallway stretched on endlessly, each step taking me further away from the exit, further away from freedom. I turned a corner, and that's when I saw it. The staircase that should have led me to the front door. The stairs I had climbed to enter. I felt a rush of relief. I was so close. I could hear the creak of the wooden steps as I hurried toward them, each step echoing too loudly in the empty space. I could almost taste the fresh air outside, feel the sunlight on my skin. But as my foot hit the first step, something changed. The air grew colder, a sudden bone-deep chill that wrapped itself around me like a vice. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Then, the door at the bottom of the staircase slammed shut with a deafening bang. The sound rang in my ears, and for a split second, I thought I had imagined it. But when I looked down at the door, I could see the light from the hallway spilling through the cracks, illuminating the space beyond. The door wasn't locked, it was just sealed shut, as if something wanted to keep me in. My pulse quickened as I tried the handle. It didn't budge. I tugged again, harder this time, but the door remained firmly shut, mocking me. I could feel the panic rising in my throat. I ran to the next exit, but the door there too wouldn't open. I threw my weight against it, pounding the handle, but the door wouldn't give. Every exit was blocked, every way out, shut. I couldn't breathe. I could feel the walls closing in, the darkness creeping closer, swallowing me whole. I ran back down the hallway, my footsteps frantic, my breath ragged. The walls seemed to close in around me, the hall growing narrower with every step. I turned again, my mind racing, my hands shaking as I reached for another door, desperate to find a way out. But the door wouldn't open either. I slammed my fists against it, my heart racing, my head spinning. The shadows seemed to stretch out toward me, their fingers twisting around my ankles, pulling me back. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I froze. My entire body went rigid with fear, every nerve on fire. I slowly turned around, and there, standing just behind me in the darkness, was the figure I had seen earlier in room 306. It wasn't just a figure anymore, it was more. More solid, more real, its eyes now glowing, staring directly at me with hollow, soulless eyes. It was close now, standing too close, its presence suffocating. I could feel the cold radiating off of it, the air around me freezing in a way I couldn't explain. Its mouth opened, but it didn't speak. It didn't need to. I could feel the pressure, the weight of its intent. It didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to stay. The temperature dropped another few degrees, and I could feel my fingers go numb. My entire body ached from the cold, but it wasn't just physical. It was a coldness that cut deep into my soul, like it was trying to freeze my very thoughts. I stepped back, but the figure didn't move. It only stared. And I realized with an icy clarity that it wasn't just one spirit in this hospital. It wasn't just one memory that had been trapped here. The hospital was full of them. Full of people who had never left. People who were stuck in the same loop of pain and fear that I was now trapped in. The walls seemed to shift again, the space growing even tighter. The whispers returned, louder now, as if the very building was alive with voices, all of them pleading, all of them wanting something from me. And then, as I turned to run, the figure vanished. I ran down the hallway, my chest tightening with each step. The walls seemed to press in from every side, the darkness closing in around me, but the door was still there. The door at the end of the hallway, a small patch of light beyond it. I reached for the handle. It opened. The night air hit me like a slap in the face. The cold wind rushed in and I gasped for breath. I was out. I had made it. But as I stepped into the fresh air, I realized something. The hospital wasn't done with me. It had only let me go for now. It was waiting, watching. And when I least expected it, it would pull me back inside. The hospital was alive with noise now. Not just the whispers, not just the scraping sound that had followed me through every room. It was the building itself, groaning, shaking, as if it were trying to tear itself apart. I could feel it deep in my bones. Every step I took was met with resistance, as though the very air was thick with something dark, something that didn't want me to leave. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since I'd entered the basement, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay here any longer. I had to get out. My legs were shaking as I ran down the hallway, my breath ragged in my chest. The walls seemed to close in around me with every step I took, the shadows reaching out, clawing at me, trying to pull me back inside. I turned down another corridor, my mind desperate for a way out. But every door I tried was locked. Every hallway led me deeper into the heart of the building. The hospital was toying with me, trapping me in its maze, its walls pressing in on me, suffocating me with its dark history. The figure, the one I'd seen in the basement, the one who had whispered to me, kept appearing at the edges of my vision. A shape just out of reach, always watching, always waiting. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape them. The spirits, the memories of everyone who had died here were alive now. They were a part of this place, and they wanted me to stay. I rounded a corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There it was, the exit. It was just up ahead, the door to the outside world, the door I had passed earlier. I took a step forward, my hand reaching for the door handle, but as my fingers brushed the cold metal, something behind me stopped me dead in my tracks. "You can't leave." The voice was clear this time, loud and insistent. It wasn't a whisper anymore, it was a command. I turned slowly, heart pounding in my chest, and there it was. The figure standing in front of me, blocking the door. Its shape was distorted now, shifting in and out of focus, like it was caught between this world and another. Its eyes burned into me, hollow and empty like the eyes of someone who had seen too much, someone who had never left. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. "You've seen what you shouldn't have seen. You know too much." The words came out in a slow, rasping voice, the sound of old paper crinkling, like the voice was being pulled from somewhere deep within the earth. I could feel its coldness, its anger, its hunger. It wanted me to stay. It wanted me to be a part of this place, just like the others who had died here. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave, to never look back, but I couldn't move. I was frozen. The air around me thickened, making it hard to breathe. The figure's presence suffocated me, crushing me beneath its weight. I don't know how long we stood there, locked in that silent standoff, but then, without warning, the building seemed to shake again. This time, harder, more violently. The walls rattled, the windows rattled. The floor beneath my feet trembled. And that's when I heard it. A loud, deafening bang. It came from somewhere deep within the hospital. A sound like an explosion, followed by the sound of rushing water, of things breaking, of something, or someone, struggling to get free. I didn't know what it was. I didn't care. All I knew was that it was my chance. I ran. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, pushing myself toward the door, toward freedom. My heart pounded in my chest, my legs burning with the effort, but I couldn't stop. I had to get out. The door flew open in front of me, and I burst into the night air. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. I could see the stars above, the open sky, the world beyond this nightmare. I was out. I was free. But as I turned around, I saw it. The hospital was still there. The lights in the windows flickered on one by one, and then the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. I had escaped, yes, but the hospital had never really let me go. It's been a few days now. I still can't shake the feeling that the hospital is following me. That whatever happened there, whatever I uncovered, hasn't finished with me yet. I've tried to go back to normal, tried to sleep, tried to forget. But every night I dream of it. I dream of the figure, of the whispers, of the voices calling me back. The coldness never leaves me. It's like I carry it with me, a weight pressing on my chest, suffocating me in my sleep. I've started to wonder if I'm the last person left who's still alive to tell the story. You see, when I was inside the hospital, I discovered something. Something that no one else had ever figured out. The The stories, the rumors were true. There were more than just ghosts in St. Margaret's. There were souls, yes. But they were trapped, stuck in a loop, caught in the place where they had suffered and died. And the hospital? The hospital was a living thing. It fed on them. It fed on their pain, their fear. It wasn't just haunted by the past, it was the past. A prison built by its own history, but there's more. The thing that wanted me to stay, the one that had tried to pull me back into its web, wasn't just a spirit. It wasn't just a lost soul. It was the hospital itself. And I wasn't the first person it had drawn in. I didn't realize it then, but as I ran out of the hospital, I had left something behind. The figure, it wasn't just trying to stop me from escaping. It was trying to make me stay. Trying to trap me in the same cycle that everyone before me had been trapped in. And as much as I want to walk away, as much as I want to forget what happened, I know it's not over. Because the hospital is still out there, waiting for the next person to wander in, waiting to pull them in, to consume them. And I have a feeling that no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, it won't let me forget.